made possible in part by a grant from the Battelle Endowment for Technology and Human Affairs.
Hello, I'm Dr. Bernadine Healy, Dean of the College of Medicine at The Ohio State University. This year, almost 34 million Americans are over the age of 65. This number is expected to double over the next 35 years. These older adults are a most valuable resource in our community. They've worked hard to build this great country. But as their health care needs change, we need to be able to respond in a way that balances the personal and the professional aspects of care. No advancement in technology can take the place of a strong, close doctor-patient relationship. In just a moment, you'll be viewing I Was Young, Now I'm Wonderful, a play by older adults and about older adults. The first part of the play explores our older generation's past. The second part raises critical issues about the latter years of life and offers a variety of perspectives on topics ranging from coping with loss to patient autonomy. The panel discussion that follows focuses on the opportunities and challenges faced by health providers as they care for older adults in this ever-changing healthcare environment. Throughout, panel members offer suggestions for balancing the personal and the technological aspects of medical care. Both segments of this program are intended to stimulate viewers to further discussion about quality of life and quality of health care in our later years. To provide health care that is responsive to our older generation, we must first appreciate their rich and full history. No one was born at age 75. Our first step is to recognize what went into the many years of living. This program certainly raises as many questions as it answers. I hope you'll enjoy this presentation. Remember, it is all our goal to make tomorrow wonderful.
Once I was young, but now I'm wonderful. Under the sun, there's no year so beautiful. Once I was smart, but now that I'm wise, I'm seeing the world through different eyes. For once I was young, now I'm wonderful.
I read somewhere that life can only be lived forwards, but understood backwards. I guess that's true. Anyone who's lived as long as I have has learned a few lessons along the way. I guess that's what this program is all about, understanding the joy and pain of a long life. When I think back, I remember childhood as a golden time, a time to build character, preparing for the long journey ahead.
Out of my way, Runt.
I'm not a runt. I'm nearly 6. Don't you tell me what to do.
My brother's older than you are.
Oh, I got a brother. He's 10. He's stronger than anybody.
Well, I'm stronger than you right now. I can push you right over.
I'm smarter than you because I'm older.
You be quiet. You're just a girl.
Hey, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me.
When I was young, I pitied the old. Now that I'm old, it's the young that I pity. Groucho Marx. We grew up too fast, discovered the opposite sex, marriage, having babies. What were we in such a hurry about?
Well, here I am at the sophomore mixer. Guess everybody's here tonight. That's Billie Jane. All she wants to do is dance, dance, dance. She's really looking me over. I guess I could condescend to one dance. She really wants me. I can tell by the way she's undressing me with her eyes. Well, I guess I shouldn't disappoint her.
Oh, Paul. Go, Paul. You know what to do now? He's on his way. Go, Paul. Baby, go. Work. Cut loose, man. Yeah. Okay. All right.
There's something I've been meaning to tell you.
Yes?
You've got the biggest pimple I've ever seen.
Then something happened that none of us could plan for, but it changed our lives so quickly. War is hell, General Sherman said. War is a disruptive, upending, gut-wrenching series of events that puts on hold the life of every human being. The world is never the same afterwards. Neither are the people.
From the Philippines to Normandy,
From Philippines to Normandy,
the Army is the place to be.
the Army is the place to be.
Sound off.
1, 2,
Sound off.
3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
A few days here and you will see.
A few days here and we will see.
And now your ass belongs to me, squad. Halt, Lil, Hayes. Thank you, Corporal. You're dismissed. All right, listen up now. I want to start off by welcoming you all to Fort Biloxi. I trust your bus ride was a comfortable one. My name is Sergeant Beeman, and for the next 8 weeks, I will be your drill instructor. I would like to make one thing perfectly clear. You are no longer a sorry bunch of scum-sucking, nose-picking, boot-licking, raggedy-ass, maggoty-faced civilians. You're in the Army now, my little darlings, and that makes you a sorry bunch of scum-sucking, nose-picking, boot-licking, raggedy-ass, maggoty-faced Army recruits. Your mommies and your daddies are far behind you. I am your family now, and from this day forward, you will eat, sleep, drink, dream, shit, shower, and shave the Army, and you will do it exactly as I tell you to do it. Is that clear? I said, is that clear, soldier? How did you address
yes,
me?
sir.
I can't hear you.
Yes, sir!
I can't hear
Yes,
you.
sir!
Damn it, soldier, I can't hear you.
He said, yes, sir, sir.
What's this, a comedian? What's your name, butthead?
Orville Flood Pocket.
Where are you from, Flood Bucket?
I hail from Crutch Rock, Tennessee, sir. That's right over next to Sadler City, right next to Silerville, you know. But I grew up
All
pretty
right,
much
you're
in-
from Crotch Rot.
It's Crutch Rock, sir.
Hey, Gomer Pyle, if I say it's Crotch Rot, it's Crotch Rot. Understood, Gomer Pyle?
Yes, sir.
Step back. In 8 weeks, you men are going to be lean, mean, killing machines. You'll be known as Beeman's Demons, an elite corps of precision killers, bloodthirsty, remorseless, savage animals of destruction. Is that clear? Are you listening to me, soldier?
Yes, sir.
What are you?
I'm a soldier, sir.
Just a soldier? I said you were a killer.
I'm a killer, sir.
What kind of killer, soldier?
I'm a lean, mean, killing machine. I'm a bloodthirsty, remorseless, savage instrument of destruction, sir.
At the end of this training, you men are going to get down on your knees and thank me, because the most important thing the Army can give you is your self-respect. Tain't hurt their face. Forward, hard, up 2, 3, 4. Move your ass, you lazy skag.
We'll move our ass, we're lazy skags.
Or you'll end up in body bags.
Or we'll end up in body bags.
They asked as a farm boy if I'd ever butchered hogs. I said sure, and they said, okay, you're a surgical technician.
I joined the Army on my 17th birthday. When I went into the Army, I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't curse, and I was a virgin. When I was discharged 2.5 years later, I didn't smoke.
I flew in 4-engine bombers, 9 men to a crew. One afternoon, some of the planes were practicing combat formation. One of the pilots zigged when he should have zagged and collided with 2 other bombers. Everyone was lost in the 3-plane collision. Later that day, they went to the barracks and cleaned out the lockers of all the dead crewmen. When I went to bed that night, there was no one anywhere near me. They were all gone, 20-some men, just that quickly. The accident occurred in less than 15 seconds. I got very drunk every night for the next several weeks.
Dear Mrs. Porter, it is with regret that I'm writing to inform you of the death of your son, who was killed in action. I understand your desire to learn the circumstances leading to his death. However, reports of this nature are prepared under battle conditions and contain only the briefest details. I hope that in time, the knowledge of his service to his country may be of comfort to you. Sincerely yours, J. Ulio, Major General.
Oh, the war taught everyone some hard lessons, but there was more to learn. After the war, we wanted to get on with our lives, raise our families, buy homes, have lots of things.
It's time to play America's favorite game, Keeping Up with the Joneses, with your host, Barry Barnsworth.
Thank you, and welcome to Keeping Up with the Joneses, the game show where consumption is king and degradation and humiliation lie just around the corner. Let's meet our contestants, Joe.
Thank you, Barry. Our reigning champions are the Joneses with 25,000 consumption points.
Watch it, don't stand in front of the camera, honey. Thank you. Now, let's meet our challenger, Fred. Oh, Fred, welcome. Okay, Fred, you know the rules. You've got to earn enough consumption points if you want to keep up with the Joneses. Land on a consumption opportunity space, and that's your opportunity to really stick it to your opponents and consume, right? Okay, Fred, you know the rules. Spin the wheel. Oh, Fred, you know what green means? The triple challenge, folks. Yes, you've got 10 seconds to decide whether you want the new car, the TV, or the houseboat. Time's up, Fred. What's it going to be?
I'm going for the houseboat, Barry.
Houseboat it is, Fred! Oh, Fred, you know what that sound means, don't you? Yes, you financially overextended yourself again, and now it's time to grovel before the boss. All right, Fred, you know the rules. You got to push the right button or you don't get the raise. If you don't get the raise, you don't get the houseboat. If you don't get the houseboat, you forfeit the game to the Joneses. All right, assume the position. Now, folks, will it be buzzer number 1, buzzer number 2, or buzzer number 3? Sorry, Fred. Wrong button. No raise. You've lost the game.
Greetings on your 40th birthday. As infants we tumble, as toddlers we stumble, as teens we grumble at life, in our 20s we bumble, in our 30s we fumble. When will we start to get it right?
My God, I'm 50. I've lost my shape. I guess for lunch it's just a grape. With one more facelift, I'll be there. I want to look like Cher. Mud packs and creams, the dress of my dreams. If I could just lose 10 pounds more, I'd do another push-up if only I weren't so darn sore.
I just had my face lifted. I want good-looking knees to go with my new face.
I've still got everything I used to have, only now it's in different places.
Woo! That's fizzle! I just groan and roll my eyes when I think of jazzercise. In your 50s, you can't do the things you did at 22. The doctor says to ride a bike. I'd like to jab him with a spike. I can barely just get on. He expects a marathon.
And it's 1 and 2 and agony. This just ain't my cup of tea. Every time I touch my toes, I fall. Can I please just walk in the mall?
First we bend and then we turn. I can really feel the burn. I can't wait till we are through. I have had it. How about you?
And it's 1 and 2 and agony. This just ain't my cup of tea. Every time I touch my toes, I fall. Can I please just walk in the mall? And it's 1 and 2 and it's 3 and 4 and it's 5 and 6 and it's 7 and 8 and it's agony.
The first 50 years go by pretty fast. And what are we all doing? Running around all over the place trying to keep up. Life is difficult, but you can make it easier on yourself. Slow down. Take time to enjoy the important things: family, friends, grandchildren.
My hands were busy through the day. I didn't have much time to play the little games you asked me to. I didn't have much time for you. I'd tuck you in all safe at night and hear your prayers turn out the light. Then tiptoe softly to the door. I wish I'd stayed a minute more. For life is short, the years rush past. A little boy grows up so fast. No longer is he at your side, his precious secrets to confide. No goodnight kiss, no prayers to hear, that all belongs to yesteryear. My hands once busy now are still. The days are long and hard to fill. Could go back and do the little things you ask me to.
I miss being needed. Once the whole family depended on me. I was the breadwinner. Only I didn't win the bread. I worked hard and earned it. When I picked up my paycheck, I was proud. I didn't mind that it all went for the family. I was proud to buy a pair of shoes, a flexible flyer sled, a college education. I was needed at work, at home, in the community, to build and haul, to sit on committees, to make decisions, to help people out. Sometimes I'd get exasperated and say, does the whole world have to lean on me? Now I wish somebody would.
I want my husband to die. He's been dying now for more than a year. He lies in his hospital room, a vegetable. He can't speak, eat, or even move. He can't do anything. He's kept alive, if you can call it that, by a machine. A torture rack of tubing invades his body. I can't bear to see him in so much pain. This gentle, proud man I have loved for 50 years. He hasn't recognized me in months. until last week he opened his eyes and suddenly squeezed my hand very tight and said, "Get me out of this mess." I said, "Honey, I'm doing the best I can." Somehow I feel I have betrayed him. Must he go on suffering like this? He's had a good life. Why can't they just let him die in peace?
There's not much to come home to now that she's gone. I keep forgetting, sort of expecting to see her there like always. So when I open that door, the silence hits me like a fist and knocks the wind right out of me. The air inside is hard and cold. It used to be warm and soft with her laughing, talking, ask silly questions. "Is that you?" she'd ask, and I'd say, "No, it's Santa Claus, or it's the man in the moon." But I felt more like me then. Now, most of the time, I don't.
I've been living with cancer for a year now. The worst part is feeling so drained. I hate the chemotherapy because it turns me into a zombie. And the pain medication makes my knees cave in. I don't like to take narcotics, but sometimes the pain is so bad, I have to. I'm fighting for time. Time to prepare me and my family for the best or the worst. I love life. I love this beautiful earth. I take more pictures of skies than anybody. I love the mountains and the trees and the flowers. Some people never see a cloud or a star. They're too busy to smell the roses. I like to smell a rose each day.
It's pill time. I take Maxide. What do you take?
I take Lanoxin.
Maxide, diazide, hydrochlorothiazide, malapress, minipress, catapress, hydropress, aldaril, alvaril, indoril, and isodil, coumadin, ecotrin, arladin, and capotin, butazide, serpicide, lasix, and odaclyside, persantine, apresilin, eretic, and reserpine, aquatension, hydrotension, salicylates, and bromates, chlorine, lanoxin, loprazorin, hydrogen, procardia, hydrodiu. Rail!
In the Eastern cultures, the old are revered for their experience and wisdom. The world is growing grayer every day. We need a new way of thinking about old age.
Nurse, what do you see when you're looking at me? A crabby old woman, not very wise, who dribbles her food with faraway eyes. I'm remembering the joys. I'm remembering the pain, and I'm loving and living life over again. So open your eyes, nurse. Open and see. Not a foolish old lady. Look closer at me.
Just give me those golden years. A few good friends and a few more beers. A lot of laughter and no more tears. In my eye there's a twinkle as I count one more wrinkle. Just how many I can't be sure. It shows memory is the first thing to go. But let's not be shattered, I doubt that it matters. It's not that alarming, in fact it's quite charming. Give me those nursing homes where there's wild nurses roam. And they just can't leave me alone. If I get much more action, I'll end up in traction. Let's see now, where was I? I need something to go by. Give me the old backyard, a senior citizen's discount card. An easy life that is not too hard. I can't remember the first thing I couldn't remember. What drawer are my socks in? Ever take my naloxone? Remember memory. Memory is the first thing to go. But who cares?
Yeah.
There are times I don't understand. Times when I can't see the plan. I don't want to say a long goodbye, but living things someday must die. Inside, I know we'll surely go to a place where there is no more pain. I'm relying on faith, trying not to complain. I don't know how I ever made it through. I'm so tired. I don't know what to do. I'm older now, but I don't feel wise. I'm seeing the world through lonely eyes. And I'm telling you, it's not all wonderful.
When I was 8 years old, I went to visit my grandmother in the hospital, but I walked into the wrong room. There on the bed lay the oldest woman I had ever seen. She reached out her hand and asked me to come closer. I was terrified. I had never seen anyone so old. I ran out of the room. "Don't be afraid. I just want to see you," she called after me. When I think back on that day, I wish I had stayed. I wish I had given her a hug.
You never stop needing to be touched and hugged.
Hugging is healthy. It relieves tension, combats depression, reduces stress. It has no unpleasant side effects. Hugging is a miracle drug.
I'm lonely. I'm lonely, but I don't dare say so. My friends and relatives fret enough as it is. They don't want me to live alone. They keep saying, "Aren't you lonely?" And I keep saying, no, because I'm not lonely the way they mean. I'm lonely for the people who were and are not now. I'm lonely for one person most of all. I'm lonely for the way things were. When the children were little and depended on me, I miss their need. I miss being at the center of life instead of out here on the edge. Going to live with one of the children, going into a home, is no answer for my kind of loneliness. But you, O Lord, are. I like being older because I can do what I want whenever I want.
Movies are cheaper.
My husband is all mine. No more competition from the job.
My kids treasure me lately.
No more deadlines to meet.
Oh, I walk briskly along feeling young and happy, and suddenly I see my reflection in a store window, and I stop and I look and stare, and I think, who is that old lady staring at me?
I find in retrospect that I spent a lot of time doing meaningless things for people I didn't really like, for organizations I didn't really believe in.
I can't get pregnant anymore.
I sometimes imagine what my own funeral will be like. All my friends coming to tell my widow what a wonderful person I was. Too bad I won't be there to appreciate it.
I'm not afraid to die. Life is a stage. We have our entrance and our exit. I have accepted this journey, but I pray that I will leave without lingering. I don't regret growing old. Growing old is a privilege many will never see. I've had a good life, and when the Lord takes me, I'm ready to go through those pearly gates. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to grow old and a time to become wonderful. We were young, but now we are wonderful.
Yeah!
The older adults we just saw truly believe that once they were young, but now they're wonderful. But is life wonderful for our older population? And if not, what can we do to make it better? This is a very important question for all of us, since the aging of our population, or what's often called the graying of America, is unprecedented. Average life expectancy has grown dramatically in this century, from 47 to 75 years of age. This increase is largely the result of advances in technology in medicine, public health, and other branches of science. However, as we just saw, many older adults are asking important questions about the quality of life in those extended years. Is the goal simply to live longer, or is the goal broader, that of making sure that the later years of life are as healthy and independent as possible? Hello, I'm Bonnie Cantor, Director of the Office of Geriatrics and Gerontology at The Ohio State University, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. During the next half hour, our panel will be addressing some of the unintended imbalances we've seen between technology and caring. We'll also focus on changing this imbalance to put increased value on some of the rewards of long life, such as caring, mutuality, independence, wisdom, and experience. In essence, we'll be discussing how best to add life to years instead of merely years to life. Joining me in the studio today are 4 experts in geriatrics who not only care for older adults, but who also help train future healthcare professionals. First, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Harry Hobson. Harry is the President and Chief Executive Officer of First Community Village, a retirement and extended care facility in Columbus, Ohio. Our next panelist is Dr. Ed Bope. Ed is the Director of the Riverside Family Practice Residency Program. He also serves as the President of the Academy of Medicine of Franklin County. Also joining us is Dr. Seth Cantor. Dr. Cantor is a practicing rheumatologist and geriatrician at the Ohio State University Medical Center, where he also serves as the Associate Dean for Medical Education and Student Affairs. Our 4th and final panelist is Ms. Linda Mauger. For the past 15 years, Linda has had a very important role as a family caregiver. In addition, she's the program manager for the Office of Geriatrics and Gerontology at the Ohio State University Medical Center. Welcome to all of you. The great philosopher Kierkegaard reflected, "Life can only be understood backwards. Unfortunately, it must be lived forwards." We certainly saw that message come alive in the program we just watched. And if we add the phrase, heard often in the South, that the past isn't dead, it isn't even past, we have an even stronger plea for looking back and understanding the life experience of our older patients. That brings us to the question, what is unique about this cohort or group of older adults? And why will understanding this help us provide care and ensure a higher quality of life for our older patients? Seth?
I think the thing about this current generation of older adults is that they are survivors. They've survived, in many cases, immigration, 2 world wars, a Great Depression, the pre-antibiotic, pre-vaccination era, the nuclear age, and now the age of electronics. And that has to color their daily activities, their interactions on a daily basis, particularly in terms of health care. Many of my older patients are quite concerned about the cost of medications, for example. And I can give you an example in my own family. My grandfather lived to be 92 years old, and literally until the day he died, he was saving for his old age. We used to kid him about it quite a bit, but it was true. He was really saving for his old age. And I think a lot of older adults are in that situation, having lived through the Depression and kind of the unknown.
But don't you see through that survivor mentality that pride and stature has really come with that as well? I saw that recently at a retirement center where I took some students, medical students that I'm teaching, and we were there on a weekday, and every older adult we saw at that retirement center was dressed as if it was time to go to church. And the pride and the strength was very obvious just in their appearance and their approach to the day, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What, you know, Strauss and Howe in their book Generations refer to this cohort group as the GI generation. They're known to be trendsetters, generally in the right direction or trend. They also become quite angry with younger people if they accuse them of being unhappy. And it's also been pointed out, Linda, just what you said, that they do even dress in bright colors to prove maybe their happiness.
They're so ready for change, too. You know, I was riding a year or two ago across the country with my grandmother on a plane. I said, Grandma, did you ever think you'd fly across the country? She said, as a child, I never thought I'd get in an automobile. So they've already, as Seth has pointed out, had so many experiences that I think even in their 80s and 90s, they're still ready for change. They're ready to accept new things.
Do you think they get enough respect from caregivers, from students, from medical residents, from health practitioners? When you see an elderly patient in your office, do you see someone who has garnered respect because of their life experiences? Or sometimes do we tend to overlook that and maybe focus on the fact that they are cranky that day or preoccupied or can't give a good history in a timely fashion that some of the current trends in medicine demand?
Yeah. I think society in general sees age as something that's causing a lack of function when that is not always true at all, and tends to talk around the older adult, and oftentimes in a healthcare setting. I know through my caregiving years, I will oftentimes be in the doctor's office setting or with another health professional with the person talking to me rather than to my father or my mother when she was still capable of entering into that conversation.
Well, in the healthcare setting, a lot of dignity and privacy is lost, and I think maybe even more so for the elderly patient, the older adult, because they're less able to care for themselves, and they do have more demands on the staff that are waiting on them.
But if we follow the trend that you've just set up of trying to take these kinds of things into consideration, the important past, how older adults have built our country, the respect that we should have for this generation, how do we do that and continue to take care of older people in this changing healthcare environment? Doesn't it make it more difficult?
Well, it does make it more difficult because their needs are a little broader than the normal patient. I mean, the normal patient comes to us with a fairly specific complaint. We can take care of that, but the older adult may have a lot of social issues with them. They may need more time spent with them. They may be coming for support as well as just for medical advice. So you have to put that whole picture together in taking care of them, and I think it just adds to the time and the complication of their needs.
But it's so important to take into consideration their attitudes and values as you deliver that care.
But you need time to do that. And my concern is in the changing healthcare environment with the term managed care, are healthcare providers going to have the time that is needed to really provide for these patients in the way that they need to be provided for?
I think regardless of managed care, we have to provide that time. And sometimes that time isn't necessarily related just to the clock. And I think we can be very productive with the time available through some techniques. 5 minutes might be just as offer just as much quality as a 15-minute visit in the past.
What do you mean by that, Herring?
I think that it should be. I'm troubled sometimes by our interpretation of what the older adult is really trying to tell us, what this program is all about, trying to understand their past.
Well, I think what you're saying is that often we have to take some time to get to know the person. And that may be a series of meetings, rather, maybe a series of 5 or 10-minute meetings instead of an hour meeting together. And we often use that technique, and I teach that actually to students and to residents, that the first meeting, particularly with an elderly patient, may be a time to get to know them, maybe a time to get to know their medication list, what their families are like, what their support structure is like, what their agenda is, and that the physical and some other things can come at later meetings, so that you have sort of a, I think some people have used the term a rolling encounter with them, an evaluation. You do parts today and another part another day. And I think they respond well to that.
You know, I agree, and that's a very good point. Once we understand more about that person, we can interpret much better what they're saying. For example, one comment we hear quite a bit is, I don't want to be a burden to my children. If we understand things about them, many times what we find is what they're really saying is nothing related to self-pity, but I'm pleading for more independence. And understanding that can only enrich our response. It can trigger responses such as, let me figure ways that this person can administer some of their own care, as opposed to a false interpretation of saying the person is feeling sorry for themselves, they're disinterested or passive in their care.
Yeah.
In order to do that, you have to have a good background as to their social situation. What capacities do they have? What kind of support do they have? Things that sometimes get overlooked in the history and taking, particularly in a younger patient. I think it's much more important to understand the environment where an older patient is actually living their daily lives. And I try to teach that to medical students, that that's one of the key things. And I agree with you, Ed. You can kind of focus on one problem per visit and have them come back and focus on another problem. And always understand that they may be more interested in a particular problem because of their background. For example, they lived before the era of vaccination and antibiotics, when polio was a scare to everybody. And those of us that have come along later have benefited from those things, and we're not as concerned about that.
Yeah. But if we look at this from the practitioner standpoint, communication is so important. And I know as I work with the medical students in the doctor-patient relationship course, we let them know that communication or lack of communication really is involved in a majority of malpractice suits. So in this rushed time, we really have to somehow figure out how we do communicate for everyone's benefit.
And I think we have to take managed care to a broader understanding. Rather than just managing dollars, we were actually responsible as the manager for the patient's physical well-being, their spiritual well-being, their emotional well-being, their preventive health, their health education. So managing them means more than just treating a specific disease. And it's a real challenge to do that in a short amount of time, but it is our responsibility. That could be the good aspects of managed care that we haven't yet considered.
So Ed, what you're doing is putting more emphasis on the word care.
Yes.
We are managing the care, not just managing the dollars that are expended.
That's right.
It's an interesting interpretation. Mm-hmm. We've talked a little bit about what we feel older adults now need, but when the next generation of older adults comes of age, will things be different? Will the baby boomers want anything different?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even before we get to the baby boomers, the next group coming about, they're going to want to be more a part of the decision-making process. Right now, I think many times what we see is that the patient, or the resident in our case, is at the center of, the physician is at the center of the medical situation. And I think we're going to have to move over and put the patient in the middle, and all of us will be really a part of the advisory team as they make decisions, simple decisions, but also some complex ones, maybe related to the end stages of life.
Mm-hmm. I think it will change because of, again, the difference in how the life experiences. And maybe it's a little bit of a joke in terms of even the term baby boomers moving into old age and wanting luxury assisted living, Harry, or kind of designer wheelchairs. But I think they are used to more comforts. Again, my grandfather would never turn the air conditioning on, even though he lived in Florida, because he thought it was a waste of money. He grew up without it. Why did he need it? Just because he was older.
But it's a perfect opportunity, you're right here, I agree completely, to really move toward patient-centered care. And I think that group will be very receptive to being in charge of their care.
I think we realize that baby boomers have a lot more life experiences to go through, and they may not turn out exactly the way we think. We have to realize that as an older person, you're a product of all the things that have happened to you. I think we've already made that point. And baby boomers have only had half a life yet. So we may actually grow up yet.
You know,
there's hope for us.
Well, that's true, and if there's one terrifying thought is if you think of the baby boomers, think of the ones that burned their draft cards back in the 1960s. I often ask myself, will they burn their AARP card when they're 55 or 60?
I think the
Is it wonderful to be an older adult?
Well, I think it is, and I think the important message here is that young is an age. It's a time in your life, and wonderful is an attitude. It's a feeling. You could be wonderful at any age. And this group of adults are telling us that their focus now is on being wonderful and enjoying a quality of life, not on being 20 or 40 or 80.
I think it's pretty common for us to underestimate how well an older adult has adapted to the life change and bring our own perspective to their current life situation and think, boy, that must be terrible to live like that because of their chronic disease. And yet they themselves have adapted to the natural life cycle. And I think their perspective is that it is wonderful that they've survived. And from a younger person's perspective, from a medical student's perspective, it's sometimes hard for them to really understand that because you project forward and your own fears or anxieties about what might happen to you.
I think that feeling of wonderful can be slanted a bit depending on whether there is a disease situation, present that may have taken charge of the feeling. So sometimes no matter how hard you try, there are some people that are not experiencing wonderful.
But what about the chronic diseases you just brought up, Linda? The sense of loss. Do older adults do better with the sense of loss than we think they do?
I don't know if they do better, but sometimes we underestimate how well they do. And I think in certain terms, they're no different than younger patients who have a similar loss. For example, an older patient with osteoarthritis and congestive heart failure and diabetes can be very similar to a younger patient who has bad rheumatoid arthritis. They've both had to change, adapt, manage their disease, manage their healthcare environment in very similar ways.
The thing that they do have to face that the younger patient doesn't have to face is the healthcare giver that says it's just old age. And so we're more willing to write things, aches and pains off as being age-related than in the young patient where we may pursue them to the nth degree.
I've seen I've seen many situations in my environment in the retirement community when the shoe seems to be on the other foot, where the older adult counsels more the children in a loss that just occurred. The term that was shared with me that many times in old age there are no unexpected deaths. And they many times will help our younger staff members or younger family members through that loss.
I think we have a clinical program that I'm involved in where we ask older adults to self-assess their health. And they will have a list of 4 or 5 or 6 coexisting conditions, yet their self-assessment is that their health is excellent. We need to always consider that, I think, and look beyond what we see before our eyes.
I think in general, older adults feel that they are healthier than perhaps we think they are. And I've had many a patient who has told me that their arthritis has changed, that they feel like someone in their 80s. And they're in their mid-70s at the time when they're telling me this. So people are always projecting ahead as to what it might feel like to be older. And I think we sometimes underestimate their capacities. For example, exercise. I try to get all of my patients with any type of arthritis to exercise. And sometimes we underestimate that it's important for older adults as well. Very important.
Well, we talked about the need to personalize the care with exercise or through understanding more about them, to understand their past, to look at what we're calling a patient-centered approach to care. But how can you, in this healthcare environment, incorporate some of the things we've just discussed into the care of the patients? How do we make this happen?
One thing that comes to mind in my situation is going back to our retirement community and talking with my department heads and challenging them with the question, are your goals for the upcoming year set in such a way that it makes sense to you, or does it make sense to the older adult, our resident? And if there's a hesitation at all in answering that question, then we need to rework the goals. We didn't listen.
I think one of the important ways is to get away from the notion, for example, in the videotape, where the patients were simply a number or a disease or a medication, and get more to a paradigm of function. In any chronic disease, we really have to focus on function. How is the patient functioning in their environment? And is it the way they want to function? So you don't want to be very aggressive in a patient who's satisfied with their level of functioning. It's okay for them to be in a wheelchair, to have a limited excursion from their home, as opposed to a patient who's very dissatisfied with that kind of existence, who wants to have their hip replaced no matter how old they are because they're not satisfied with their function. And assessing function in an older patient, I think, is the key to making it happen in terms of how we deliver care.
Are you suggesting that we focus less on the disease and more on how the person is doing with the disease?
Absolutely. We need to develop a different paradigm in terms of our usual thinking and training, which, after all, has been disease-focused.
We've been trying in training to get the resident to think beyond the frail elderly person in a hospital bed, to think about what they were like before they came into the hospital, what their life's going to be like afterward. And in the ambulatory training, which we're all moving more to, we're encouraging house calls to look at the environment. That's, after all, the best place to assess function. We have found that we're often more comfortable with the patient once we've been in their home, and we know that they have comfortable chairs, we know that they have food in their refrigerator, and we know that they can get to the bathroom without obstacles. And so that's a great tool to use in teaching this to younger health professionals.
But Ed, does this mean that there are things you could do for a patient that you choose not to?
I think we often choose, are in the position of choosing more what we're not going to do than what we are going to do.
Let me play the devil's advocate here and ask the question, under the new health care environment, will we be permitted, will the physicians, for example, be permitted to take that kind of time, which is more closely associated with the clock?
Well, I think there are lots of ways to answer that. I think, yes, we will be permitted, because as I was pointing out earlier, we're responsible for managing their care, and sometimes we're given an amount of money actually to manage their care. And so that can be one-hour visit or 10-minute visits, whatever is best for the patient. It would be different for different patients.
It also may not be the physician who's the center of that kind of care. I think that remains to be seen as to whether we're going to successfully implement more of a health care team approach to patients who have these needs.
You know,
who are you talking about with this team? Who would be involved?
Well, all sorts of healthcare professionals who can provide services to the patient that are needed by the patient, and I think we're moving more in that direction.
You know, it's interesting, we're talking about function and care, and as I look back over about the last 16 years, and when I feel as a family member that care wasn't working, I think what the health professionals were concentrating on was curing. And we were in the middle, and are still in the middle of a progressive disease that can't be cured. And that, I think, was a real frustration for the health professionals that were involved and kept trying to cure with maybe more medications or, you know, things that they couldn't do, and therefore then the families kind of moved to the side because care wasn't being given.
Linda, you bring us to the issue, really, of end-of-life issues and the whole idea of having to care because we are not looking to cure at that point in time. Should anything be said about the patient-centered approach and managing end-of-life issues?
Well, I think it's something that should be addressed with every patient, and I try to use holidays as a time to encourage my patients to talk to their families, to get an idea of what the younger people like or the older people, because when you're totally well is maybe the best time to talk about end-of-life issues. It's very hard to get to the end of life and to deal with it in an open and upfront way. Families are often not structured to do that. So I do think it's good for them to think about it ahead. I think our legislation for living wills, although practically has not been helpful in getting people to talk about the issue, has been extremely helpful. More and more families know what their mom and dad or grandma or grandpa felt about life support and are able to go along with that plan.
Do you think our medical students and residents are comfortable dealing with those issues, or even comfortable being around older adults, or even frail older adults, or nursing homes? Do we have to desensitize students and residents to the older population?
Well, another way to put it would be that we need to sensitize them to it. In fact, I don't think they're comfortable with it, and I think it's experience that they need, just as they need to see surgeries, which they aren't comfortable with when they first do it. So they need exposure, they need structure, they need curriculum in geriatrics.
And how can we help? We being maybe some of the allied medical professionals, as we are spending more and more time in the resident or patient's homes, and once again making your time even more valuable with them.
Well, Seth has mentioned that, that it's going to take a team approach, and that involves nurses and physicians and ministers and relatives and neighbors and hired health care givers. It really is going to take a mobilization of all of those people to solve the problems for just one.
And earlier we were talking about is it wonderful to be old? And I was thinking that is a relative answer also. And if your health is good, yes. If it's not, maybe not necessarily. And also financial security is such a major piece here that even in that managed care interdisciplinary team, there's probably room for some financial counseling, which can maybe reduce some of the anxiety and stress later on.
Absolutely. We're almost out of time, and what I'd like to do now is ask you one final question that might help summarize today's discussion. What message can you give, quick message, to other health professionals or health profession students to help them provide the kind of care that we're talking about? What is it? Can you encapsulate it?
In my situation, I would say get to know the resident and try to understand what a gentleman shared with me several years ago, and that is that we weren't all born at age 76. We have a life's experience behind us.
I always try to encourage my students and residents to simply listen, to just sit down and listen and talk to the patient. And I've had many patients tell me that I was the first person in a long time that simply listened to them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important point in interacting with an older adult.
And to really care for the whole patient and to understand that they're not there with an isolated situation that day. There's much more to the story.
And I think establishing a partnership will make it all work more smoothly.
That's all the time we have for today's presentation. I'd like to thank today's panel members, Mr. Harry Hobson, Dr. Seth Cantor, Ms. Linda Mauger, and Dr. Ed Bope for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking with all of you today.
If you have questions or would like more information about today's program, write to the Office of Geriatrics and Gerontology, the Ohio State University Medical Center, S2042 Davis Center, 480 West 9th Avenue, Columbus, Ohio, 43210, or phone 614-293-4815, or fax 614-293-5612. This program was made possible in part by a grant from the Battelle Endowment for Technology and Human Affairs.